Right, so next up we move on to a keynote from our platinum sponsors, Adaptive. Please welcome Matt Barrett, CEO and founder of Adaptive, who is going to be talking about technical intensity, how and where to create technical intensity within your organization to innovate, differentiate, and compete.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
There we go. Good morning, everybody. Wonderful to see you all within the same four walls at the same time, rather than all sat on my computer screen in different Zoom boxes. Much more enjoyable way of interacting. I hope everyone is looking forward to a very enjoyable day of discussion and connecting during the breaks as well. I know I certainly am. So I am Matt Barrett. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Adaptive. We are a technology provider. We build trading systems for financial services, capital and commodity market participants, specifically things in the front office. So we live and breathe trading technology. And I'm going to talk today about technical intensity, but not first before talking about digital transformation and how I perceive we've done it in our industry, for better or worse, and the problems I think it's going to create for us as we try to innovate our way into the future. Technical intensity is a term coined by Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, in 2018. And that succinctly illuminates one of the problems with digital transformation efforts that our industry have been enacting over the last decade. And we can hopefully use it as well to create a map of a route out of here. And the use of the word map there is deliberate, because I also want to touch on a process that we use at Adaptive and with our clients to help us together form a strategy, Wardley mapping. So let's get started. But first, let's begin with a quote. Software is eating the world. Mark Andreessen, smiley gentleman here, was one of the co-founders of Netscape. He was also one of the developers of what became Netscape Navigator, which was the world's first free software browser and basically built the internet that we know today. Later, he founded one of the first software-as-a-service companies and cloud hosting businesses. And then in 2009, he started his own VC firm with a colleague of his, Ben Horowitz. The one thing about this quote is that it remains evergreen. Interestingly, it was originally stated in 2011, over 10 years ago. He had the perspective of a Silicon Valley venture capitalist with a long history in the software industry. And today, it still feels, oddly, like a relevant call to action. First of all, it's obvious that software has been, and will continue to eat the world, and that it leads in one ineluctable direction, simply towards more software. Surely the answer is not just to throw software and software developers at all parts of your business. If software isn't solving your problems, you just aren't using enough of it, doesn't sound quite right. Not all software is created equal, and not all the required business capabilities of our organizations require the same sort of technical solution. So today I'm going to talk about the considerations to keep in mind when navigating our collective world of trading technology. But first, I think a Slido question. Lorna. How much has software consumed your trading world? Fairly, partially, moderately, almost completely, or entirely? Fantastic. So we in the room are well on the way to being completely consumed by software. Isn't that a lovely sensation? For the 3% of you that have had have been barely consumed by software, I would love to have a coffee with you and find out what your lives are like. Sounds amazing. So we'll just leave that up for a little bit longer. Perfect. Thank you. So with that question turning over in our minds, let me turn to digital transformation. Those two words that have come to mean everything and literally nothing at the same time. What do I mean by digital transformation? So my very simple reductionist definition is of automating, I should say, in a digital fashion, human-based business processes. Over the last 20 years, and increasingly in the last 10 and 5 years, businesses have deployed software developers, software products, and various software tools and utilities, all used in a huge and varying range of ways to automate previously analog processes. But while those efficiency gains have changed businesses and our experiences in ways that often exceed our ability to recognise them, the resulting digital transformation has left those same businesses with a patchwork quilt of software practices and products, all bound through interconnections and dependencies. We wouldn't want to go back to the huge inefficiencies of analog humans for a digitised business process, but they were better in one important way, I believe. They could flex, evolve, and adapt in response to changing requirements. And those requirements were often driven invisibly to the overall organisation by market demand. My point? That in digitally transforming our businesses, we've encoded a flexible version of our business into a fixed digital version. And that this fixed digital version, realised in custom software and products from vendors that can span the entire enterprise or be deployed for a single use case, we are now finding is incredibly difficult and resistant to change. Change in analog processes with humans is obviously a difficult and painful process, but they can of course adapt and evolve themselves. And as I've said, often do so imperceptibly in response to market demand. But change in digital processes, encoded and fixed software, has all the difficulties of human change that, while also dealing with code, is not able to adapt and evolve itself. Changing a digital landscape involves all of the challenges in humans, plus the significant difficulties in unpicking technical independencies, working with vendor relationships, and often dealing with custom software that's no longer understood. So, all this to say that while we may have digitally transformed our analog businesses, we have created processes that are digitally frozen in time, unable to change rapidly or efficiently in response to market demand, and most importantly, the need to innovate. So, if I've called out a problem that I see with digital transformation, what is the way out of here? We need new words and new concepts to help us reason about a different way of approaching the digitalization of our businesses. The phrase technical intensity, as it was coined by Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella in 2018, differentiates a digitally transformed business which is locked into that first digital version of itself and finds itself very difficult to change, from a business which has an ability to integrate and adopt new technologies and change its current digital state. The key concept here, and what becomes the overriding term in the equation, is the ability to adopt new and evolve existing technology within the organisation. And so, to take another moment to ask a question of the audience, how would you rate your organisation's ability to adopt new and evolve its existing technology? An early confident lead is now being overtaken by a fair amount of pessimism in the room. What is it that they say, that a lie is around the world before truth can get its boots on? Very good. So a fairly a non-universal experience, I would say. A third of people think that their organisation does a fair job, good and excellent, which is great. So about over 75% of the people in the room think their organisation does at least a fair job of integrating new and existing technology, which is fantastic. And very few think that they are doing a poor job, which is very, very encouraging. So, if we think back to digital transformation, which set many firms off on their transformative journey, was a desire to be more like the digitally native organisations of Silicon Valley. But while their goal was the right one, the destination they've ended up at is a cause of considerable problems. A digitally transformed organisation, locked in time, unable to change and evolve. The digitally native businesses that were trying to transform into have, as a core part of their DNA, the ability to remain constantly in digital motion, continuously refining, evolving, and changing their digital selves. They are at their heart, and to return to the theme of our opening quote, software businesses, which means that they are built, led, managed by software developers and technologists with a focus, a technical intensity, if you will, on specific parts of their business. So is the answer to encourage even more software and software developers to eat our respective businesses? If so, not without careful consideration of exactly where and how, because as I'm sure many of you know, I have bad news from the technology recruitment front lines. The search for technical talent, which will increase our organisation's technical intensity, is now, thanks to the pandemic and remote working, globally mobile without leaving their home offices. The same trend towards online working, which enables technologists to work for any firms, anywhere in the world, has also itself driven a huge demand for businesses to increase their investments in digital transformation and to increase their own technical intensity. Developer salaries are heading up, faster even than inflation. The headlines make for compelling reading. Amazon has doubled the cap on its cash compensation for corporate and tech employees from $160,000 US to $350,000 US. Reports indicate that software developer salaries are on the increase at JP Morgan. And it's not just cash compensation that's increasing. Flexibility is a huge motivator for technical staff being given incredibly generous, compared with a few short years ago, perks around location, leave, and working hours. All of this, of course, has a cost for the company. The increases in costs and competition for talent is one thing, but on top of this, it turns out that maybe more money isn't actually going to solve this problem. Tech workers, as it turns out, are also looking for more meaningful, engaging work that has purpose, that can be clearly aligned with the broader goals of the company itself, rather than simply work that is well remunerated but seemingly needless and done inefficiently. All of this means that the talent that will be used to increase your organisation's technical intensity is expensive and getting more so, globally mobile like it has never been before, and looking for meaningful work that has a measurable impact on your business. To me, this signals that we need to be exceptionally thoughtful and strategic about where we put our expensive technical talent to work within our own businesses. At Adaptive, this is something we struggle with internally as we think about how and where to automate our own business processes to enable them to scale in finance, HR, and consultancy operations. With our clients, it's something that we discuss with before leading into any engagement to ensure that we are working with them on the right areas of technology within their organisation to give them the biggest return on investment. I can assure you it's not much fun being halfway through a consultancy engagement and the client suddenly figured out that they don't actually want what you're building them. Much better to figure that out early on. So to do that, we use a strategic framework and try to map what are known as value chains. There are lots of strategic frameworks that enable this, of course, but the one we use is called Wardley mapping, invented originally by a gentleman called Simon Wardley. It's pretty simple to understand, and I'm going to give us an overview in a few short slides, but it's also, I find, surprisingly subtle and powerful. Its ease of understanding makes it a great framework to use with people who aren't familiar with it at all, as they can rapidly get up to speed and collaborate with others in the session. At its core, it's about getting a group of people onto the same conceptual page about the state of their organisation, so a discussion can be had about what to do next. So, let me introduce Wardley mapping and its relevance in the discussion so far. At its heart, it's about value chains, those concepts, resources, or activities that we need to create within our organisation to create value for our clients, so for which they pay us a premium over what it costs us. These are placed on a map from top to bottom in decreasing order of visibility to the end user or client. This is a familiar concept to many, I'm sure, a value chain composing all of the elements you need in your business. The novelty introduced is on the horizontal axis of the map, where from left to right, we can represent the maturity of a concept or an idea. Is it just a rough and hazy concept, still in its genesis? Is it well known enough to be custom built, but not yet available on the market? Is it a well understood concept or resource, which can be shopped around for competitively, and so looks somewhat like a product? Or is it heavily commoditized and consumed via a utility? An easy to understand example, let us quickly map a reduced value chain of a trading system, something I'm sure familiar to everyone in the room, with a particular focus on technology. I've placed the components on this map to illustrate a point. You may disagree with where I've placed them, and if you did and we were running a workshop, it would be a very interesting experience to draw out what the differences are. but I've placed them on the map to illustrate a point about evolution, and that is that the relentless shift from left to right of every component as it gains traction. This map represents a view of the world I saw 12 years ago at an investment bank that shall remain nameless. This bank had a group of technologists who, in 2010, were exceptionally proud of the fact that they were still designing, building, and operating their own data centres. Now, from 2022, the world looks very different. Data centres have become, at the very least, a product, and I would argue more of a utility or a commodity with the emergence of the huge public cloud service providers. And so the map has evolved to look more like this. It's axiomatic that if data centres are a long way down the value chain, they're less visible to your end users and therefore less important. And you should be trying to procure them for as little cost as possible. So now let me try and pull these themes together and make some predictions about where trading technology is going and where you should make sure you are investing or not investing within your own organisation to maximise your technical intensity. Some economic principles first of all. As components move from left to right on the map, they typically move from high margin and high risk to low margin and low risk. That is, they are less profitable but more certain in the revenue that they generate. More interestingly, I think, for us interested in innovation, in the far left, we have very high failure rates, but what we also have is the highest possible future value, where if we invent some new capability that's very attractive to the market, we can generate very high margins at relatively low risk, because we were the one that came up with the idea, through the phase of the product or the opportunity and the capability as it evolves over time. So, let me put one final map on screen. Another map of a trading system, but this time from a closer perspective, perhaps that of a software development department within the bank rather than the entire bank itself, which is concerned with the development and operation of a trading system. How I've laid things out here, again, could be the source of a very useful discussion. But as it stands, I've captured what I think is a lot of how many firms in financial services go about building their trading technology. Organisations that spend time investing in bespoke UIs, you would think, would have clearly made the strategic choice to compete on those capabilities in the marketplace. An alternative approach would be to procure a vendor product to be their client-facing UI, but then those firms would need to compete in some other ways in the market to stand out from their competitors and other firms using the same vendor product. But for those firms that are competing based on the features of the trading platform, then it makes sense to concentrate their resources on that area. That is, to maximise the technical intensity of their organisation where they are differentiating themselves in the market. It does not make sense to do so further down the value chain where those capabilities are less visible to the client. And remember, technical intensity isn't just about being statically digital. It's also being able to evolve your existing technology and adopt new technologies. The further we go down the value chain in user visibility, we would hope that things move further to the right. But what we often see within firms is organisations implementing capabilities and functionality that, while critical to the systems they are building, are not differentiating in and of themselves or visible to their end clients. Think about people still building data centres themselves today. In the best case, this results in a huge duplication across our industry. Sorry, in the worst case, this results in a huge duplication and inefficiency across our industry. And in the best case, it simply results in inefficiency within a single organisation. So, given all the points that I've touched on, the increasing cost of technical talent, the increasing choice of technologists to work for firms anywhere they want, their desire to work on projects and technologies that can have a meaningful impact on the companies that they work for, it doesn't seem like this waste and inefficiency can go unquestioned. What would a better map look like? You can see here the movement to the right of the map for a number of components. One thing worth calling out is that within technology, we have the benefit of open source. And so if we create some open source technology, we can turn the capability and the functionality that it embodies very quickly into a commodity or utility, greatly lowering its cost to acquire. I think us in financial services have done a fairly poor job engaging with the open source community and the open source ways of working, but I think there's a lot of improvement to come in the future. So, where to from here? If you are an organisation that cares about technology, do perform this exercise yourself with your teams and see where you are spending scarce resources on non-user visible and therefore non-differentiating technology. Think about where things will evolve, how you can make things evolve, and think about where you can reduce your spend and acquire them more cheaply, enabling you to focus on innovation and hopefully capturing some future revenues. Thank you all very much. Any time for questions? Yeah. As well as the technology challenges you've described, isn't a lot of the issue cultural and organisational? Yes, it hugely is. The cultural challenge, like since we're under Chatham House rules, the cultural challenge, there are many, and some of the darker motivations are really around empire building. What we see within large banks, small banks, buy side, sell side, it's not just investment banks, it's anywhere that IT can create the opportunity to build ever-increasing budget, ever-increasing team size, while getting further and further disconnected from how the organisation actually makes money and connects. It's a very, very hard thing to fight against. You mentioned open source. I did. A recent acquisition. Yes, very true. We recently acquired another business, Real Logic, who have some open source technology, and our intent, because as I said, we think open source is a fantastic way to allow us as a consultancy, but also allow other firms in the industry to focus on what is truly value add and innovative. We are going to indeed leave it as open source because we think that's the right thing to do for the industry. Cool. Thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.